But I have a question, like, I think it's an interesting thing to think about is, because we're talking about video game scaling, is like, I think a lot of people, it's interesting to see like what is the architecture of a blockchain video game and scalability, and how important is decentralization to video gameplay, you know? Because you look at things like Loom, or there's this other guy I met the other day from Amazing Blocks who runs a game called Krypton, who has 1 million users and 50,000 transactions a day, called Orin. Can't wait to find him again today. And out of Beijing, and they have more like daily active users than CryptoKitties. They run on a completely private Ethereum node, not connected to the main chain whatsoever. But users are very attracted to this. They're very attracted to the fact that it's a blockchain video game. And to me here, you know, we're striving for a fully decentralized game. And I think there are other, like, I think there's a big distinction, like how important is the gameplay to be centralized versus decentralized, and under what conditions. And I think, I'm surprised there's not a lot of people talking about that stuff, to be honest.
Well, I just don't know why you would want a fully decentralized game. I mean, like, Augur is an exception in that it's not really a game, but they're betting markets, but like, that you need a super high level of censorship resistance simply because you can create markets for anything, you're going to piss a lot of people off. Most video games don't do that. Like, unless you're really worried about pissing off like a nation state, or the CIA, or like ExxonMobil, for the most part, like, most applications don't need to be fully decentralized.
But we can always do this compromise that even though it's not fully decentralized, it can be eventually decentralized. And if you've got some kind of mechanism for eventually be able to recover your CryptoKitties after Action Semi is gone, or if you, after 20 years, want to reuse your items, and you've got a receipt from an old blockchain that still has some persistence in the main chain, then I think that's an added value right there about that interoperability and reusability. And it's always about having that option too.
I mean, I just think most applications, like most parts of video games, just don't need to be decentralized. Like the in-game items that you earn, yeah, sure, put those on the blockchain, but why put any of the rest of the infrastructure on the blockchain?
But I think, like, so if you think like blockchain, are you discussing the blockchain as a specific piece of technology, or like as a concept?
I'm just like, why, like, blockchains are good when you need censorship, resistance, or trustlessness, neither of which you really need in most gaming applications.
But I would say that, like, I think I see, like, if you read in the between lines, right, of like what Decentraland is doing, for example, is they're trying to create a world, a digital world that lasts forever, right? It's like, it's a new reality. Like, it's not a virtual reality. It's like, it's another layer, like adding another layer of reality forever, from here to like the end of times, right? Technically, like, until we have computational power, we should have Decentraland. And I think if you think about that economically, it means that you add a new layer of existence, right? So like, how much is the GDP of a forever virtual world? Probably like 1,000 times bigger. You can invest $1 billion into that, right? So like, maybe the point is not blockchain. Maybe the point is kind of having an infinite, like a persistent, as much as reality persistent virtual world. But I don't know, maybe I'm just...
No, I agree. It's kind of like an immortal, like these items become immortal beyond like the game existing, or like a studio supporting it, or servers operating. And I think like one of the key distinctions, like at EdCon, someone made the point of like, why is decentralization important? And it's like, would Bitcoin and Ethereum be valuable, or as valuable today? Would we have cryptocurrency or a digital asset that we attribute value to if it wasn't decentralized? And I don't think so. So I think there are going to be a class of video games. So I think like value creation is greater in a decentralized network because there's more trustlessness. That's kind of the point of it. And I think that is what's interesting. So I think, obviously, as a rhetorical question, I think it's important, but I think it's really hard to achieve. And I think there will be lots of games that will be very successful, even though they're centralized. And they'll kind of move forward, and they'll iterate towards perhaps a more decentralized system as other infrastructures get developed. But I think for us, we want to tie the mechanics of a video game to the economics, so that the video game can be owned by its players, and through gameplay they can actually earn scarce items that are trustless, and then they can go and actually trade them for other interoperable cryptocurrencies such as Ether, and essentially profit from gameplay. But how do you do that if the game is actually centralized? So like, that's like, I think the holy grail, but I think that's hard.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And Jeremy brings an important point, which is decentralization is not the goal. Nobody cares about decentralization, but it's the way to achieve trustlessness, censorship resistance, persistence in our case, and a lot of other things. But right now, decentralization is the best way to achieve all of those, because the sets kind of like intersect.
So I can disagree more. I think the only way we are actually going to build successful applications long term is figuring out how to architect systems that people want to use with the goal of decentralization in the long term. So this is one thing I keep on going back to all these startups that are pitching to me recently, and I've been just telling them, like, look, you have a really, like, let's say it's a protocol for decentralized ride sharing. What blockchain are you going to build on top of? Like, that's not going to be ready for half a decade. We don't know what blockchains are actually going to be adopted in 5 years. So you should be building an architecture that you can start to use now, that protocol for decentralized, for ride sharing, and then have plans to decentralize it over time. It's very possible to do that. You don't need to start with a fully decentralized application. You can start semi-centralized, have something that people actually want to use, and then over time, as we coalesce around certain blockchain technologies, and determine what's actually going to be used in 20 years from now, then we can start to actually deploy fully decentralized applications. But I think trying to start decentralized is, from a UI, UX perspective, a horrible idea. There are certain circumstances where that's not true. Decentraland's a great example where you kind of just want to start fully decentralized. But for the most part, any game, most enterprise applications start, you know, with something that works, and then and know that you're going to be working towards decentralization long term. But you know, if you don't have users, why be decentralized?
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you have super strong opinions, and I think like we were like briefly talking back, you actually mentioned also like if we knew this before building Augur, like we built it in a different way, right? Or something like I think we were talking about like how have you built it. So like how your experience of building Augur has changed your views over what's the priority and how do you do things? Because I think like this could be like an interesting, you know, kind of like element for us to consider, because probably your views have moved from here to here, and I really want to journey.
Yeah, look, we started building on top of Ethereum 9 months before the blockchain even went live. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done as an entrepreneur, but I was young and naive enough to do it. And it turned out to be a good decision. But like in hindsight, you know, we were building in Serpent, which was the Talix language, that like 2 years later we realized after auditing the compiler was totally broken. We had to like rewrite all of the code for Augur in Solidity, which isn't even a very good programming language. And you know, this technology is just so nascent that, you know, trying to take a product to market at this point in time is somewhat of a fool's errand. You know, if you're doing it on top of Bitcoin and Ethereum, okay, I'd give both of them greater than 50% odds of being around in 10 years. But any other blockchain, no way. And like all of these scalable solutions, who knows what we're gonna actually use? And so you have to be pragmatic. If you're actually trying to build a real business, something that people are going to use. You know, Augur, I mean, thank God it's live, it's working. Like, you know, there's $1 million transacted a day. Like, holy shit! Like, it's a miracle. But that probably shouldn't have happened. The odds were against us because we just did this too early. You know, and we're all here pretty fucking early. Like, CryptoKitties is really cool, but you know, it's one of those things. How do you sustain it? How do you make sure that the experience is so good that consumers that don't give a flying fuck about decentralization, now excuse my French, how do you get them to actually want to come back to your application day after day after day? That has nothing to do with censorship.
I'll add a few things. I agree. I mean, look, like user experience to get mass adoption through consumers makes sense. And it makes sense that we can have incremental architectures that we can be kind of scaffolded and we can improve over time to make them further decentralized over time. That makes sense. It's a good argument. I will say that there's enough money to be made from creating a decentralized system, and enough people that are incredibly smart around the world that are driving for it. Enough research projects that I've seen and spoken to, we're closer than half a decade.
But that's exactly
like
the problem.
Cosmos
There are all
or
these
Polkadot.
smart people that realize they can make money, and they're making shit tons of money, but nobody's using their applications. Like,
They're just, it's still early days, as you also said, right?
So we ran a state channel auction for $60 million in December. So it had few users, but it was freaking cool.
it all comes back to the users. If there's no one using our applications, it doesn't matter how much money we raise or how much money is being transacted. This decentralization is built on the concept of network effects. Your network is only as valuable as the number of participants in it. And when we have, 1 million people around the world that have a shit ton of crypto and are pumping into all these tokens and applications and kitties and shit, it's like, it's cool, but we're not getting anywhere. Like, we need to think about mass adoption here. And, decentralization is not how we get there. It's part of the long-term solution, but usability is first and foremost here.
Yeah, but I think here, like, maybe you can add something, but like, here it's not about this, like, I think this thing is about gaming, right? And I think, no, seriously, like, so like, they trying to build games, and the games is like, essentially is, so my personal theory is that every technology that crossed the charts did so by leveraging entertainment and slipping into popular culture, okay? Even cars, like, nobody gave a shit about cars, we had horses, they were better, they were nicer, you could like pet them, you cannot pet a car. So like, it's nicer, they were faster, and then this guy comes with like this car, which is horrible, and then people start caring about that because a bunch of car nerds starting to do racing, right, with cars. So like people started to get like, the imagination flies, and this kind of like opens up space, bends reality for everybody, so everybody starts caring about something that they didn't care about. So I think like entertainment has a possibility to bend reality for the entire amount of people that are not here today, right? So think about the other side. So like how entertainment, like I think like these guys care more about the entertainment part than the decentralization part, right? So in this sense, what do you think is going to be the next entertainment platform? And other than Decentraland, of course, like what are you planning for? Like which going to be other entertainment platforms for as a Trojan horse for people to get into this space and learn?
But I mean, this is why I'm at this conference. This is why I'm so excited. Like NFTs are so fucking cool. I didn't know the term NFT a month ago, and then all of a sudden I was writing an update to my primer on crypto assets that I write for Distributed Magazine, and my designer was like, what about NFTs? I was like, what are those? He's like, oh, crypto kitties. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't know that was like a whole new asset class. I knew about ERC 3721, whatever it is. But like, I hadn't really thought about it until like a month ago. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is the Trojan horse. Like, we don't need full decentralization with NFTs because you can put NFTs in any single video game, any online game, any mobile app. That is our Trojan horse right there. It's not more complicated than that. Get people using digital collectibles that have interoperable value, and all of a sudden people get really excited about blockchain technology.
So we have to wrap up. So maybe kind of like, what's next for layer 2s, and how are you gonna use them to stress test? Like, what's the next big stress test for layer 2s, and how are you gonna deploy, and tell us more about the future?
I don't want to end this channel without mentioning Perun virtual channels, which is the ability to instantiate an state channel without a blockchain transaction. And I think that's going to be huge. I think that's going to make everything more seamless, because you don't need to have a transaction to start using something, but all your NFTs are already there, and you can eventually counterfactually go to the blockchain and claim them.
I'm trying to think what the question was. What's the next thing for state channels? I think just iterating them. People really like. I think like there's certainly per run virtual channels are very interesting. Counterfactual, like the generalized state channels by L4 is very interesting. I think they released a white paper a couple weeks ago. There should be some implementation coming out in a couple of weeks as well. I think that'll be very interesting. The seller networks, if no one's heard of seller networks, definitely look that up. That may be in fact like best in class in terms of state channel work. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's just about seeing these things become real and then applications being developed on them. I think the suggestion I gave to other projects was like, okay, it's cool that you're building libraries and perhaps even speculative research, But what you need to be doing is building applications, you know, and then driving the applications to fulfill the research that you require to build that, because only then will you build the necessary infrastructure. Otherwise, you'll be over-engineering potentially in a generalized case. So I think like building real applications with this stuff, keep focusing on that, is going to make it realer faster. So.
Yeah, I mean, blockchains are databases. Nobody cares what database they're using. Good second layer solutions are going to be using blockchain technology, and people are not going to know that they're using blockchains. That is the optimal use case. People ask me, where's blockchain technology going to be in a decade? Hopefully we're not going to notice it, because it's going to be existing primarily in the back end. That's what you should strive for as a developer.
Yeah, exactly. Are you the person using state channels or Plasma? They don't have to worry about the complexity of it. The user experience should be, I mean, it's must watch, I mean, in the future. And the Plasma or maybe the state channels, I would say it's very important for marketer. Yeah.
100%. This stuff should be transparent, right? So, and not visible to the end user. 100%. But it will take time. There's a lot of issues to resolve to make that still real.
Okay, awesome. I think we have to wrap up. Maybe if you have like a couple questions from the audience, anybody has?
With all that passion on the stage from Jeremy, I'm sure there's some questions.
No questions?
Nope. All right, there's one here.
Awesome.
Thank you for being so honest and straightforward with everybody. I think that's kind of gone unsaid a lot for most of the conference. I'm just kind of thinking, it seems as though like the blockchains themselves, like you were saying, I believe, Esteban, that it starts to have everyone have their NFTs be available on the blockchain and provable, but you need the entire blockchain to kind of verify this thing. But at the same time, like if blockchain gets enormous, how do you sort of continue to have this verification when like any individual user has such like a high barrier of entry to prove their ownership of the NFT in the first place?
Who's this question for? Anyone.
So if the question is about computing power and storage capabilities, for example, you can always have a download a backup and then store a hash and eventually revive your stash of NFTs, kind of like zipping them into a file and keep it in an old email. Of course, usability has to be paramount for this to happen. It could happen today, but it's not necessarily a problem. There are ways to store a lot of information, hide it underneath a hash, store only that hash in the blockchain, and then rehydrate it.
Yeah, I mean, blockchains are expensive to use today. You should, if you're creating value on a blockchain, it should be high value. NFTs, when you're thinking about NFTs, you should be thinking to yourself, how do I create something that people are going to place enough value on that they're going to want to pay to use it every time? It's not like a Beanie Baby where you just rearrange it on your drawer. Like, you have to go and pay to engage with these NFTs in a way that, you know, collectibles historically have not been there.
Exactly, that's actually why the first NFT in Decentraland started as the land, because we thought that it was going to be a high value asset and not hats, for example.
You guys have any opinion for that? Okay, awesome. Is there